And the object of this exercise is to determine what happens when you take a horse who's ridden his whole life in a bit and for the very first time put him into a bitless bridle. And Jennifer has very kindly offered to bring Jasper in here, see if this horse and this rider will do better if we switch them into a bitless bridle.
Hi everybody, my name is Jenny and this is my best friend Jasper. He's a Norwegian Fjord and we've raised him since he was just a little guy. He first came to Stampede in 1998 when he was 1.5 years old. So he's been doing this for quite a while, and I've had lots of trouble with bits. I've tried everything. He has a very, very soft mouth, and he's actually really sensitive to leg pressure. But the problem that we have with bits is when I put something as simple as a snaffle in his mouth, every time I give him pressure on his mouth to do something, his mouth gapes wide open. And that doesn't look very pretty when you're showing him or when people want to take pictures. So the bit I've found that works is called a kimberwick. And it's actually not a very nice bit. So I have to be really careful and really gentle on his mouth. And if you guys notice, there's a chain that goes underneath. And the bit inside, it has this port. So it kind of goes into the roof of his mouth every time I tug on it. And I have to be really careful just because he's so sensitive. So I've gone through probably about 20 bits. And this is the only one that I found that works. And there is a very expensive version of this kimberwick that I ride him with. It's about $130.
So we're going to take the first 10 minutes and show how he rides in a bit after 8 or 10 years practice, and then we're going to give her 2 to 3 minutes to practice bitless, and everything she does in the bit she'll have to do over again bitless. The horse's ears are back. That means one of two things. Either he's listening very politely and intently to his owner, or he's not happy, or a combination of both. And I'd ask you please to halt. Now see what happens when you halt, how he opens his mouth and says, "Yuck," that the horse will stop. And will you please stop Jasper now? And again he stops nicely, but he's playing with his mouth and his ears are back. And he's fidgeting a little bit. Mouth and a chain underneath his jaw. And halt please. And same thing, he stops, but he tosses his head and he says, "I don't like that." And she didn't ask him to back up there. And a lot of that can be because they're fussing, their attention is with the bit. Now, let's have a little bit more fun. Since you're right along the rail there, why don't you just back him up? Now again, when you have a horse with a bit in his mouth, all of your commands go to the bit. So look at what he's doing with his mouth. Just back him up. And he tucks his head in nicely, but see, he's not going too awfully straight. And he's still fuss, fuss, fuss with his mouth, and he's not going terribly far for us. Isn't that pretty? Whoops. He should be head on to the rail and going sideways down the rail. What you have to communicate with is the bit that's inside the horse's mouth and your legs and the way you're sitting. There's so many more things than just what's on the horse's head that communicate with the horse. Nice. So you've obviously done a lot of work with this fellow. Says, "I love him." I pull on this rein, it puts pressure on the opposite cheek. So the horse has to turn his head that way. And Jerry's going to show the horse just how you teach your horse, and first to make sure on the ground that he understands what you want him to do in this bridle, because he's never had this on before. All we did was fit it to him. So Jerry's going to show him if he pulls on one rein, if he pulls on that rein, he wants him to turn his head that way. If he pulls on this rein, he wants him to turn his head this way. And if he pulls on both reins, he wants him to back up. That's pretty much it. The horse understands the bridle. It's really important when you put the bridle on that you fit it appropriately on the horse. It has to be slack here at the back, that you can wiggle your fingers around where it crosses the horse's jaw. Ride around for a couple of minutes. You've got 2 or 3 minutes, and you let me know when you're ready to do everything that you did in the bit. So every single thing she did in the bit, she's going to do over again bitless. And while she's riding around and you're watching her, I'll just tell you a little bit of the history of how this bridle came to be. Because we really are just backyard horse lovers. My husband and I have had horses only for 12 years. And we're your typical people that grew up, you know, always wanting horses, loving horses, but never having an opportunity to really own horses. How we doing, Jennifer? Just give you a couple more minutes? Okay. He's starting to drop his head. He's starting to get the idea. So some horses, it just takes a matter of a couple of minutes. Some horses, it may take 5 or 10 minutes. Some people write to me and they say, you know, it took 3 or 4 rides. Every ride kept getting better. Will he stop quietly, calmly, and not fuss with his mouth? So halt, please. No, quietly, calmly, and not fussing with his mouth, and it's not gaping open. That went well. Let's try it at the trot. You say, no, you don't have a bit, but you still have to do what you're told. And will you ask him to halt, please? But he does stop, and he stops nicely, and his mouth is not gaping open. That worked well. Want to try her at the canter? I'm going to give you some fun. Go around again just to build him up. Okay? We want to make it a challenge. And please halt. And from a canter, he stops and stands nice and still. Now's the test. Will he back up? He's never been asked to back in this equipment before. Oh. What he's responding to here, so very nicely, thank you, Jasper, is that the noseband of this bridle is texturized. The horse won't push into a textured noseband. There are other brands of bitless bridles on the market, but with all humility, none of them work quite as well as this bitless bridle. And part of it is that rubber gripping on the noseband. Now remember that the bit is only one of the things that you're using to control the horse. We have riding schools in the Toronto area. They're growing all over the place. And kids learn to ride without that emphasis on the bit. So you've got about 2 more minutes to show what the horse can do. It's a very gentle piece of equipment and horses understand it. And I think that's because it was mainly our horses that designed it.
That was fun. I was a bit skeptical at first, but it worked awesome. It took him a few minutes to get into the head, getting tucked in, because he didn't really know what was going on. But as you guys just saw when I was loping him around, he completely figured it out. So I'm pleasantly happy with the results.